$3,000 Polygon Siskiu D5 versus an $11,000 Polygon Siskiu D5. Does expensive equal better? Let's find out. And thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, but more on that in a minute. We started with two identical Polygon Siskiu D5s, and we've been upgrading them to become short travel trail bikes that can tackle any trail. One bike got expensive parts, and the other got cheap, affordable upgrades. For the high versus low finale, we're hitting the road for a proper trail test in the world famous Sedona, Arizona. And we want to test our bikes in three distinct categories. First, we want to see how these polygons climb. Are they comfortable to pedal? And can they navigate technical climbs over big rocks? Second, we want to test how fun and comfortable each bike is to ride. And third, the ultimate test for these bikes, going down the gnarly, steep Highline Trail. Finishing on the world famous obstacle, the chute. But before we head out to our road trip, let's recap all the upgrades we've made to our polygons. And we kicked off both builds with the dropper post. High bike got a $1,000 wireless dropper and seat upgrade, while low bike got a $150 used dropper with a $30 Chinese carbon seat. And both bikes saw one of the biggest performance improvements in the series and took off a full minute off the stock time. However, the high bike's expensive dropper didn't make a difference over the low bike's dropper, although the low bike seat post has started to become increasingly loose. So we both agree it's worth it to spend a little bit more money on a higher quality dropper post, but probably not wireless. Once we streamlined these bikes with droppers, it was time to replace the heavy stock coil fork. Low bike went with a $400 used Marzocchi Bomber Z2. While high bike spent double that, $1,100 on a Fox 34. We opted to overfork the bikes with 130mm travel to make them a little bit more capable on the gnarly trails. On the test loop, it was very clear which fork was better. Whoa. After testing, the Marzocchi Bomber just felt way off, but you guys in the comments let me know how I could fix that. So I ripped apart the fork to find out that they were right. There weren't any foam rings underneath the dust wipers. And after fixing that, the feeling of the fork became very similar to the Fox 34. However, on the Sedona trip, the Marzocchi fork reared its ugly head again and continued to feel stiff. Through all the testing, the bikes still had their 2x drivetrains, and they were really beating up the frames. High bike got a wireless SRAM XX1 Axis costing $1,000, while low bike got a new takeoff Shimano SLX drivetrain and cassette for $125, which turned out to be a nightmare of compatibility issues. In the end, this required hours of labor, spoking wheels, and hundreds of dollars worth of tools, which is fun for some, but it may not be for everybody. After testing, we found out that the XX1 Axis drivetrain is a delicate little son of a gun and has a major problem pedaling under torque and skipping gears. It was the low bike Shimano drivetrain that actually shifted faster, plus it'll never run out of batteries like the high bikes. After the drivetrain, it was finally time to address the rebound-less rear shock. High bike got a top-of-the-line coil shock that was $1,100. Low bike went the simpler and cheaper route of a RockShox Monarch Plus that was $300 and can be infinitely tuned with only a $20 shock pump. But after testing, the coil shock was abandoned due to an oil leak. To fix it would have been $200 for a factory rebuild. So instead, I installed a Fox factory rear shock, which turned out to be a great shock for the high bike. Then on the testing, the low bike's rear shock experienced significant fade, and on our trip, it heated up almost so much it felt like it was a hardtail. After the shocks, it was finally time to ditch the 27.5-inch wheels and go with 29ers. High bike went with a set of $1,700 Noble wheels with the instant engagement silent Onyx hubs. This wheel set was boost through axle, but the frame is 141 quick release. Luckily, Onyx makes a set of end caps, making the conversion a breeze. While low bike was left with yet another custom wheel build with a set of used $150 spank rims. During our test, the carbon wheels completely transformed high bike and made it into a rocket ship up hills. The bike's handling was also massively improved. The low bike's wheels weren't much of an improvement except for the 29-inch wheel conversion. They just felt so much heavier than the carbon wheels. The carbon wheels shaved off another full minute off the Saga test loop, another massive performance increase. We walked away from that test both agreeing that carbon wheels are just so much fun, and if you have the money and are serious about mountain biking, we definitely recommend them. After the wheels, we installed some sick contact points. Low bike got some budget bars and pedals, and high bike got some suspension handlebars, a pair of super grippy pedals, and ergon grips adding up to $1,000 on contact points. The low bike went too low with upgrades, and the cheap Crank Brothers pedals were super slippery. And the budget bars were kinda stiff. It's definitely worth it to spend more money on contact points. The high bike suspension bars did what they promised and led to less forearm fatigue. But at $425, they're way overkill. And I think a mid-tier bar could give plenty of comfort. And the high bike's ergon grips were expensive, but we both ended up loving them. Finally, the last upgrades before heading to our Sedona trip were the brakes. High bike got a set of $2,000 Trick Stuff Maximas, the rarest brakes in the world. While low bike went with a set of $400 Hayes Dominion brakes. $400 for brakes can be pretty high end. But I wanted great stopping power for low bike to be able to survive Highline Trail. The Trick Stuff Maxima's installation was way overcomplicated, but proved to be the superior brake with better stopping power. Also, they had amazing modulation on our Sedona trip. The more you pulled in the lever, the more braking power there was. The Trick Stuff brakes have a slippery brake lever, and it's kind of ridiculous to have to modify your brake lever on a brake set that expensive. But first, we'd like to thank this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is a website building and hosting service that makes it so easy to make your own website within minutes. Since I started with Squarespace, I made an account and was browsing their templates within minutes. And with the trial, I didn't have to enter any card information to play around with the templates. And that's a real big plus to me. There's templates for every website need, and I'm right on the edge of finishing my online store and maybe sell some of Chad's high bike parts. Wait, what? So go check out squarespace.com for your free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/EvansMTVSaga to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. With both bikes fully upgraded, we hit the Saga test loop for our final timed run. At this point, the bikes have basically outgrown this loop and it was no longer challenging. The stock D5 logged a time of 9 minutes and 13 seconds. And on this run, the fully upgraded low bike finished in 7 minutes and 32 seconds, almost 2 full minutes. And on the high bike's final run, it was feeling super dialed in. And I wanted a KOM.
King of the Mountain.
I did it! I got my first KOM, and it was on a Polygon D5. Well, what about the rest of the loop? Oh, I was gassed after the KOM and finished in 8 minutes and 3 seconds, about 30 seconds off my best time. So it was actually the low bike that had the fastest recorded time on the Saga test loop. But after that, we packed up for the real test in Sedona, Arizona. We began our trip with a quick 110-mile drive up to Sedona. And this would be the first time we've rode in the legendary location.
Just arrived to Sedona and man, I'm feeling a little bit nervous. I haven't felt this way in a long time.
Before we began our climb, we filmed the intro for this video and had time to reflect on how different these bikes were just 8 weeks ago. When we started this series, the stock bikes weighed 36.8 pounds. And with all of our upgrades, high bike now weighs in at 30.8 pounds. With my unlimited budget, ended up costing $11,000. and the low bike is a bit heavier at 33.2 pounds, and a total project cost of $3,329 because of the disaster compatibility issues. On the first climb, spirits were high, and the trail seemed pretty smooth up to this point.
Get out of the way, Chad.
Little did we know, we hadn't even started the actual Highline Trail. The Highline Trail is a world-famous 3.5-mile single track. But the last half mile is where the real danger is, dropping off 300 feet in just 1/10 of a mile. The bikes will be tested in the first category once we arrive at the janky climb. This tight, rocky switchback has challenged even the best YouTubers. This section would definitely be a test of each bike's maneuverability.
Yeah, first try. Let's go. Chad, what happened? Why didn't you clean it first try? Oh man, you got lucky.
It wasn't all about the upgrades, rather line choice and just ability to balance the bike. As the climb went on, these short travel trail bikes were great climbers, and we were treated to some of the best views that Sedona has to offer. When we got to the top, it was apparent why people love to come to Sedona. The views were amazing.
Wow.
After we soaked in all the views and horsed around a little bit,
Man, now I'm getting a little bit nervous.
it was finally time to begin the downhill, beginning with this super exposed drop-in.
Yeah.
Both bikes easily navigated that section.
Yeah.
However, this was just a very small preview of the challenges to come. As the speeds picked up, the differences between the two bikes would begin to show themselves.
Ooh, that downhill is real bumpy. I don't know if it was a short travel or the suspension, but man, that was a rough ride on this bike. Oh, that didn't feel too bumpy to me. It actually felt pretty good. But you were pulling away from me a little bit.
The low bike was yet again experiencing shock fade, and that's when the oil inside the shock heats up so much that it stops working as well. It almost felt like a rigid bike at times. The next section we arrived to was the creek gap.
Oh, shoot.
This deceiving dip in the slick rock may not look like much, but at speed would cause a very harsh bottom out for pretty much any bike. And the best way to hit this is just to bunny hop the whole thing.
Nice.
Dude, I pulled up and the front end was just so heavy.
And oh man, I think I strained my neck. Dude, that was so sick. I just pulled up and sent it.
I might have folded the tire a little bit. The further down we went on Highline, the features became more and more challenging.
There's no way I'm hitting this wall with this short travel bike.
At this point, we began second guessing this entire test and wondering if these short travel trail bikes were enough for this trail. We continued our careful descent until we reached the chute. This would be the ultimate obstacle. Every upgrade we've made this season will be put to the test on the last section of Highline. A $3,300 build versus an $11,000 build. How will they compare? The nerves were high at this point. This was easily the most steep section that we've ever rode.
Man, this is pretty scary. My heart's beating out of my chest.
But because the high bike is the most decked out, I was going first.
Whoa! Whoa, that was crazy. I think I could do that again. That's a difficult one.
Oh, dude.
Well, that was pretty crazy. Good save though.
Dude, there's no way I'm hitting that thing. The low bike is already having limitations, and man, I got a wife and kids.
Reviewing back the footage, it looked like I lost front wheel traction because I hit the dust going off the main line. After our confidence was shattered, there were more and more steep sections to face as we began our walk of shame. As the trail left the dangerous cliffside, we started getting our confidence back. The Highline Trail wrapped up in a dried riverbed, and the feeling of relief set in. We may not have conquered Highline Trail, but we made it to the bottom in one piece. All with our Polygon Siskiu D5s that used to be entry-level mountain bikes. So Evan, does expensive equal better? Well, kind of. The low bike was overall less enjoyable to ride. What the low bike did prove was that an affordable bike can get you out exploring on some super awesome trails. It also proved that you don't need new parts to upgrade your bike. You can get great upgrades for your bike that are used from like Facebook, eBay, OfferUp, and my favorite, Pinkbike. Spending more money on the high bike did make it way more fun to ride, but the upgrades didn't make us magically a better rider and able to tackle these death-defying trails. Exactly, low bike did almost everything that high bike did, but we were limited on rider skill and fear. Plus, most of high bike's parts were a splurge, and the top of the line expensive stuff will really only give a minor performance increase over the mid-tier upgrades. And to be honest, I kind of feel bad spending all your hard-earned money on this dumb high bike. Wow, are you all right? I didn't expect to hear that from you. At the end of the day, we both had an amazing experience, one that I will never forget.
Yeah.
Mountain biking isn't only about Strava KOMs, even though I have one. It's about experiencing nature and the thrill of the ride. And you don't need an expensive bike to do it. The stock D5 with the dropper post and some slime tubes is more than enough to get you out on the trail. And that's the most important thing, it's just getting out on the trail. And for the record, rather than throwing $2,000 at a D5 to make it trail capable, you can get a much better deal on a stock budget mountain bike like a Vitus Mythic or a Polygon Siskiu D7. Yeah, the point of this series was to test the upgrades on identical bikes, and this is still an aluminum frame with quick release axles, and it's definitely not made for double black diamonds. So everyone wants to know, which bike would you ride, high bike or low bike? I'd say neither. I'm gonna pick and choose parts that I like from both bikes and put them on my bike, but I'll continue my search for mid-tier upgrades that can rival even the best top-tier upgrades. So thank you all so much for watching my first season of High Low, and overall we spent about $15,000 upgrading both bikes, and it was the biggest project that I've ever done. And thank you to Bikes Online for providing us with these bikes, and we'll have links to the bikes in the description and all parts seen in the videos. Yeah, this was a pretty dumb test, and all the high bike parts should have went on a real mountain bike frame. That's carbon, like this one. What is that? How much did you spend?